Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. It's Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 24th of January 2024. And as you can see, there are a gazillion tabs at the top. There's a lot going on at the moment, a lot to get through. Let's crack on. First, we'll go to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can, of course, find these in the description to the video below. Right, 840 personnel lost is a high number. It's not over the magic threshold of 1,000, but it is a significant number of people lost. Now, 13 tanks is a little bit down from yesterday, but still over the average. That is a sore loss for the Russians. 31 APVs, armored personnel vehicles of various types, have been lost, according to the General Staff. That is a huge number. And wait for it, 61 artillery systems lost. This is just a phenomenal number. I'm pretty sure that has to be the highest number in a day. I'm sure someone will let me know if that is indeed true. It would be obviously great to see some extensive footage of these losses to make sure that we are in the right sort of area when it comes to these losses, that the General Staff are at least somewhat accurate in what they're claiming. One multiple launch rocket system and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. Interesting that another 2 AD systems there could suggest just a tough day. 61 artillery systems in one day, 31 APVs, and even 13 tanks is nothing to sniff at. 840 personnel high as well, 49 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 7 pieces of special equipment. Again, really big numbers posted in those categories as well. And you can see 37 drones and 22 cruise missiles. That would be from the night before. Some really significant figures that the Ukrainians are claiming about the Russians. My goodness me. Right. When it comes to what Andrew Perpetua has found on the socials, we can see that yet again, this is very much in favor of the Ukrainians, with about a 5-to-1 loss ratio there. Even more if you include the fact that, see that 2 of those are decoys. It's probably more like a 6 or 7-to-1, 6-to-1 ratio probably, maybe even more actually. Anyway, a lot lost here. Now, yesterday, remember, there are phenomenal numbers there again, and we have had 2 days of very high claims from the Ukrainian General Staff, and on those 2 days, very high loss stats from Andrew Perpetua. Remember, these skew towards drone losses as opposed to other types of loss. So there is that to take into account. And of course, you're not going to have everything posted online, are you? So anyway, what do we have? Actually, if you include one of these, it's just a Baba Yaga drone. Not just, I mean, they're fairly significant, but I'm always a bit dubious about including even like fairly large drones on these stats. I always think it should be kind of, but I guess it's equipment, isn't it? Where do you draw the line? It's kind of, that demarcation problem. When does a bit of kit become worthy enough to include on here? Do you include a little video thing, but not include a drone, even though a small drone might cost the same, depending on what type of drone it was and what it was doing? Who knows? Anyway, I'll leave other people to make those decisions. You can see just a couple of T-64s and then vans and SUVs, really. So that's a very low value set of losses for the Ukrainians for one whole day there. On the other hand, the Russians have a Buk M2 air defense system, a Psylocke electronic warfare system, comms equipment, a Yastreb AV. Right, that thing there is $250 million worth of kit. They lost one of these recently. There's news about the Russians pulling them to the front line, getting to the front line, and then they were shouting about it, that particular one, the previous one, and saying, here it is, what a great bit of kit, and then it got targeted, probably due to that shouting about it, got targeted and blown up, and that was like straight to the front line, $250 million worth of stuff, and then bang. Well, it's happened again. So, I mean, that is, I wonder if that's worth as much as like a patrol vessel. Like, is that worth more than a small ship? I don't know. It's a huge amount of money. So that alone, if you just had that one bit of kit there, that would be the Russians losing a hell of a lot more than the Ukrainians in terms of value. That one bit of kit. But it's not just that one bit of kit. They've lost all of this. It's a really terrible day. And then Zoopark as well, another radar system. Let's go and look at the value of the Zoopark. Yeah, so Zoopark radar systems, they're counter-battery radar, so they will track a mortar and artillery ammunition to locate where they are so you can fire back. So counter-battery, I don't know whether it's a Zoopark 1 or 2 that was taken out, but this Newsweek article talks about Russia struggling or will struggle to replace, this back in March 2023, Zoopark radars obliterated in strikes, according to UK Defence Intelligence. So, yeah, Zooparks are pretty high value. That's another $10 million piece of kit to add to the $250 million piece of kit above it. You've got a number of artillery pieces, not particularly high value. Interesting that there's often a disconnect between the general staff claims of artillery systems and those that are on Andrew Perpetua's list, and I have a feeling it's how those artillery systems are taken out. They're going to be further back from the front line, so it's not going to be first-person view drones that blow up artillery pieces generally, unless they're brought too close. Although we're starting to see FPV drones being used with a 20-kilometer range, that will then mean that some of those artillery pieces will be in range. So that's possibly what's explaining these FPV drone hits on those artillery pieces. But it might be that this is the one equipment section that's less likely to be included in these feeds that Andrew is going through, because it's further back. They're getting hit with other things. I don't know. Anyway, when we look to the tanks, we've got 2 T-90Ms being hit here. That's significant. They are the newest tank that the Russians have. I've got footage of T-90S, which is the export variant. We'll talk about that in a second, being hit. So, yeah, some pretty heavy tank losses there, even though that, they're... well, it's just... I'm flabbergasted that even this list of verified losses, that the Russians can sustain this. But it's this radar stuff and air defense systems that are going to be super important for the Ukrainians to attrit. Infantry fighting vehicles, a whole bunch of BMP-2s and 3 BTR as well. No BMP-1s on that list, like I've talked about previously, and then other bits and pieces. So just a really bad day at the office for the Russians. And this is all happening while the Ukrainians are absolutely struggling so much for supplies, for artillery ammunition. They need that stuff. It could be that we're just going to start seeing a growing proportion of equipment being taken out by drones, because it looks like the Ukrainians aren't going to be short on drones in the same way that they are short on artillery ammunition and mortar bombs. Okay, going to the biggest bit of news that's cycling around at the moment. That is an Il-76 military aircraft has crashed in Korochansky district of the Belgorod region. So this is just over the border. What's all that about? As you can see from the map here, is this a case of the Ukrainians using effective air defense again? That's a claim. The Ukrainians are making claims about this. Now, this video that you see doing the rounds at the moment shows an absolutely, a massive explosion. I can't, I can never show these in full, but it's a huge explosion. So what is responsible for that massive fireball in the distance? There were 63 people apparently on board the Il-76 that crashed near Belgorod, according to Russian media. On a video without the watermark in the middle, it is visible the large pieces fell off the Il-76 while still in flight. So you can try and work out what's going on. It looks like it was hit by air defense. There's air bits fell off it there. On board the Il-76, which crashed, there were 65 military personnel, that is then claimed, of the Ukraine, who were being transported to the Belgorod region for exchange. 6 members of the flight crew and 3 escorts, according to Russian claims. So, first thing to note is the Russians are now claiming that this was transporting POWs. Very clever bit of spinning that, if that is the case, which is to say, oh, you shot this down. Oh, well, actually, more fool you because you've shot your own troops down. That's quite clever. Now, is that the case? Well, it really, really blew up, and it looks somewhat unlikely, or at least there was something else on board as well. So Russia says the plane which crashed was carrying 65 POWs. But there was also another claim that Russian Deputy Kartapolov claimed another Il-76 with 80 captured Ukrainian POWs had to turn around after the crash to save their lives. How magnanimous. And then the other sources, in the Ukrainian sources, are saying that it was downed by Ukraine's air defense and it was carrying S-300 munitions. Now that looks more plausible given the explosion. Could that explosion be as a result of just the fuel on board the aeroplane? I guess maybe. It could be, but it also seems to fit with me that it was carrying munitions as a big explosion. So who knows? The Russians will make a claim that will try and minimize Ukrainian success, and the Ukrainians will make a claim that tries to maximize Ukrainian success. And the truth will, I don't know, maybe we won't find out the truth, but there you have it. Okay, that is significant. See if there's, and yeah, it's estimated that the plane has a value of $27 million, so you can add that to the Russian losses. The Russian Defense Ministry said that there were Ukrainian prisoners on board. The Ukrainian side has not yet commented. It seems like there are comments that there were that the Ukrainian air defenses were involved. There are some things coming out, it seems, at the moment, but nonetheless, we'll see how that develops throughout the day. Russia currently loses 400 soldiers per square kilometre in Ukraine, says Umarov, the defence minister. I don't really know what that means. Like, over what time period? So without a time period, that's fairly meaningless. Unless it's just like the whole of the war, split it up into square kilometres, and that's how many troops have been lost. I don't really know. Anyway, despite a six-fold artillery advantage Russia has failed to achieve, advantage Ukraine's defense minister has stressed during the official defense meeting. Just talking about losses in general, I don't know if this was... there's a guy that's basically walking around filming this area, talking about what happened here back last year. And I don't know whether this was like a staging point where loads of troops were getting ready for a big attack and it was hit, and there were like minibuses with loads of troops in, and there was supposed to be like really heavy losses. But anyway, the guy says in this there were 3 strikes here, 28 guys out of 120 survived. In other words, that's a 92%. 92 people died in those strikes. Coincidence or maybe not, he says. And that's what he says. Just looking at it, says lots of other things, but just to let you know that when you have figures that come out like this on a daily basis, you think, goodness me, 840 people. Wow. Well, in this one strike area, they lost 92 guys, and I don't know how many wounded. You can possibly add the wounded to that, and then those are the sorts of things that underwrite these huge numbers that the Ukrainian General Staff post. And this is a Russian source talking about the aftermath of this missile attack on their positions in Donetsk in November 2023. So yesterday, talk about that Yastreb AV radar system that's worth $250 million. Well, this is a big video, says no reports. The 14th separate regiment destroyed some very expensive pieces of heavy Russian equipment. So not only was it that Yastreb AV radar system, but a Buk M2 and Buk M3 launchers, Zupak 1 counter-battery radar system, and a Giertsen S self-propelled gun. Millions up in smoke. I mean, just the value of stuff destroyed in that video alone, just that one video, is phenomenal. Big losses for the Russians there. Now another catastrophic explosion of a tank, and Spartan News knows that I've been talking about wondering whether these FPV drones are now starting to carry shaped armor-piercing charges so that they can penetrate, because I've been seeing vehicles blow up fairly instantaneously from the impact of these FPV drones, rather than catching fire, waiting, then a catastrophic explosion from cooking off ammunition. It's like it might be the ammunition blowing up predominantly here, but it's that shaped charge getting inside, like getting through the armor, maybe going in a weak point, because we're seeing them go around the ring of the turrets of a lot of vehicles, often at the back, and that's possibly a weak point to get in, and then the ammo rack just underneath then catastrophically explodes. But it's just that we are starting to see these really big explosions on the back of like the immediate penetration or the immediate explosion of the FPV drones on tanks and IFVs that wouldn't normally react in that way. So Spartan News says, I believe this might be the new shaped charges being used on FPV drones. This tank was penetrated similar to how a TOW missile strike would look like. So yeah, that's a T-72B3 going up in smoke. Now I'm including this one here. It's a rare T-90S damaged and abandoned, as said by the author, after a Javelin strike on the Marinka front in Donetsk region. 8 T-90S losses were documented so far. The previous one was documented in April 2023, so a long time since then. Now, why these are significant is because these are the export variants. The question is, why are they using export tanks on the front line? And again, it goes back to, ideas of having to. They have no choice. They don't have enough tanks. So seeing something like a T-90S is a signifier that the Russians are having production issues with tanks because they are using tanks they should be selling. Or indeed, there were these rumors. There was an Indian journalist who did an article further near the beginning of the war, talking about how a whole batch of Indian tanks had supposedly gone back to be upgraded in Russia. Then Russia started the war, and the claim was that you started seeing those tanks on the front line. It's like they've literally like nicked those off India. Like they're Indian tanks. Now, does that signify that indeed, they're in a lot of trouble in terms of procuring that kind of equipment? Right, where were we? Sorry, doorbell goes. I lose the plot. Okay, moving on. We have, I won't show you this footage for obvious reasons, but again, it's the importance, and this will go both ways. This is just a video from a Ukrainian point of view, but there will be Russians doing this. But just 2 Ukrainian GUR special operators eliminated 22 Russian soldiers with a .338 caliber sniper rifle, or sniper rifles, in one night. There's 22 people, one night. So if that's just one pair of snipers, imagine what's happening up and down the front lines, and again on both sides. We know, or at least we're led to believe, earlier statistics in the war, and I don't know, with the advent of more drones on the front line, but previously I believe it was 8% of all losses were as a result of snipers. So if you look at 1,000 losses in a day for the Russians, then 80 of those will be from snipers. Here's one where just 2 snipers have killed 22 soldiers. Just huge. So it's the second biggest killer after artillery, but I don't know now that drones are such an important component. Right, moving on. Anyway, I'll add to that. Looks like Hainel HLR 338 sniper rifles finally arrived. That's for those people who know their sniper rifles, for which the German government denied export licenses to Ukraine for years because of it being a conflict zone, and now obviously things are flowing more freely. Okay, another video here, and that is the Yastreb AV, that $250 million worth of equipment up in smoke. It's the second one destroyed in 3 weeks. Most expensive single piece of kit on wheels on the battlefield. So there you go. That's the video evidence for that. Again, all of these should be in the description below, linked there, so you can watch them in full. Sometimes I don't have all of them because I find things on the fly, but most of them will be there. Now, just on a personnel loss front, here we have a Ukrainian intelligence officer being named now. The story is he covered more than 600 kilometers on foot through enemy territory to destroy a Russian Tu-22 M3 bomber and damage 2 more at Soltsy Air Base, the main intelligence directorate reported. Lieutenant Colonel Ole Babi commanded the operation on August 30th, 2023, while covering the retreat of his brothers in arms. Ole was mortally wounded during an ambush. Ole and his group have conducted 9 successful recon operations in the Russian rear, 12 measures for local resistance organization, and found up to 70 important strategic objects that were used by the Ukrainian army to inflict damage upon. English is a bit funky there, but you get the point. I mean, this is an incredible feat that he has completed, and you can read details of it in a number of places. And he's been now named formally, and that is impressive stuff. So good on him. I don't know if it's worth just going through that. It's probably you get the idea that he went all that way, 600 kilometers on foot through enemy territory to carry out a special combat mission to stop terrorist aerial bombing of Russians of peaceful Ukrainian cities. Having made their way into the deep rear of the enemy, the scouts fulfilled their mission, destroyed a Russian Tu-22 M3 bomber and disabled 2 more, and they themselves suffered irreparable losses, returning to the territory under the control of Ukraine. The reconnaissance group of Colonel Oleg Babi was ambushed and engaged in an unequal battle with the Russian invaders. In this battle, on the 30th of August, while covering the departure of his comrades in arms, he was mortally wounded and died, and has now been awarded the Hero of Ukraine. Right, just a little snippet from one of Andrew's 2 videos from yesterday. This is him looking for green eyeballs, which is what he does traditionally. I say traditionally because he's not done it for a long time, is look over endless amounts of satellite imagery to find out if there's a difference from the previous load of satellite imagery, maybe a couple of days before, to see if there are more pockmarks in the ground, and that signifies shelling, and you work out which side that shelling is coming from, and then you can tell which side controls that tree line or is in that position. So the Russians are shelling the Ukrainians here in this field. It means the Ukrainians control that field in order to be shelled, and that means the Ukrainian line needs to be there and the Russian line likewise needs to be there, or whatever, and vice versa. Now, because of winter and autumn and winter, the cloud cover stops this from taking place, but this was a really clear winter's day that provided some wonderful satellite imagery for him, and he is able to do a load of this kind of work. Now, he then just gave this opinion, which I think is interesting.
I'm really curious how Russian behavior is going to change during the course of this year, because I don't think they will be able to perform these attacks. I think they have like another 8 or 10 months in them, but I think by the end of this year they're going to run out of vehicles.
If they continue with that pace, yeah. Might be.
I mean, if they continue at this pace where they're losing like 10 a day, it might be even sooner. Like, they might run out in like 6 months. I'm curious, because there were reports today of attacks near Novoyahorivka. Yeah, this is pretty much where I thought.
So, and then he goes on to talk about other things. But I think that's, how long can they sustain these levels of attacks? How long can they sustain losing this number of tanks and APVs and artillery systems a day? And so, although Ukraine are in real trouble with artillery ammunition, they are still doing a thoroughly impressive job of degrading the Russian capabilities there and capacities. Right, Russia, here we have a Colonel Vadim Zavayalov of St. Petersburg Police. He slipped, fell, and died. I mean, Windows were so last year. Now you only need slippery feet to die in Russia. So he's died. I don't know if that's anything dodgy or not, but nonetheless. Right, 100,000 people in Vladivostok. So that's on the eastern seaboard of Russia, a long way away from anywhere really. Anywhere in the rest of Russia. 100,000 people there without electricity after an electrical substation blew up. This appears to be a common occurrence in Russia at the moment, really struggling to give consistent energy and water supply to their population. Right, not a lot of information I can find. It's all about that plane, really. There's not a lot of information I can find about strikes within Russia or Ukraine. But for the third time yesterday, Kharkiv was under rocket attack. That has been pummeled over the last couple of days. It's going to be really challenging for citizens of Ukraine's second biggest city. This has come out from the BBC, and there's been talk about this over the last week. I've reported this a number of times, that when we have had missile waves from Russia attacking Ukraine, the claim is that many of them didn't reach their targets. So even if they're not shot down, they appear to be not reaching their targets. And there are claims that they are obsolete, not very reliable, but also that electronic warfare is playing a part. And if this is the case, this is a significant moment in the war. So the Ukrainian electronic warfare system helped repel Russian missile attacks, says the BBC. For the first time, the Ukrainian military command has claimed that it was able to neutralize their quote, neutralize 24 Russian missiles using electronic warfare rather than air defense systems. And I don't know if this comes up on their interception rates, actually. It would be interesting. So if there were a number of Iskander-M missiles that didn't get 5 out of 12 in the last wave that didn't get were intercepted. I wonder whether that is interception from electronic warfare, or whether of the 7 that weren't intercepted, like physically intercepted, maybe of the 7, some of those were brought down from electronic warfare. I don't know which way they work out their stats, but that would be really useful to know that. But to neutralize 24 using electronic warfare rather than air defense systems is really useful. Western analysts talk about a turning point in the defense of Ukraine's sky. This is really true. Like if this is just a bit of technology that can stop those missiles, then all you need is to be able to scale that up and afford to make more of them. Make a whole bunch of those, have them around Ukraine, and then suddenly Russia's missiles are rendered impotent. This is potentially a massive turning point. You don't need to spend gazillions on Patriot missiles, or maybe, I don't know, maybe this is really costly. I don't know. But I assume you won't need continued provision of equipment, of munitions. You know, Patriot missile systems are great, but their missiles cost X, Y, and Z, and you're firing them off several times a night. That's going to cost you a lot of money, and also you are relying on the ongoing production of those missiles and other nations to be able to provide you with them. Well, a single bit of electronic warfare might just be like, once it's built and put in place, you're just like scrambling frequencies or whatever they're doing. That you don't need continued consumables for that. The only question might be, will the Russians adapt, and then you have to change the tech, but that's a kind of a software thing rather than a hardware thing, I would imagine. Right, and a downed Russian missile just falling into the courtyard of a residential building here. This, I've included this just to show you that, you know, what goes up must come down, and that's really can be really significant in terms of damaging particularly to residential areas, as you can see. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. So Dmitry Rogozin, who is like a Russian mill blogger, says a position of his volunteer battalion was under attack by FPV drones every 10 minutes for 4 hours. He says the superiority of FPVs is palpable, and gamers with drones are replacing old school artillery. Gamers with drones, gamers on tanks. It's this idea that times are changing, and now that you're getting expertise. People who used to game on their Xboxes and PlayStations are now becoming really adept at operating drones and such equipment. I don't know exactly where this is, but it is more likely to be down in the Dnipro River area, I would have thought, because that's the one area where supposedly there has been some advantage, although Moses and his team have been wreaking havoc on Ukrainian boats across the river. Says, yes, and today there was a continuous raid of enemy drones on our positions. In 4 hours, 24 FPV drones flew into the strong point of only one of our volunteer battalions. In the sector of responsibility of our neighbouring detachment, 15 FPV drones are on duty in the air. Naturally, rotation is difficult. In other words, you can't move troops and rotate them at all, even locally, because you're vulnerable to being attacked by drones. It seems that now the issue of countering killer drones has moved the issue of counter-battery warfare on the pedestal of particularly burning problems of armed struggle. And why do the Ukrainian armed forces need shells and artillery if they are replaced by gamers with their charges and grenades flying on high-speed drones? Good question. This is, I think, what's going to happen. We are seeing more drone strikes because this is something that the Ukrainians can produce lots of, whereas artillery ammunition, they are struggling with. The production quotas from indigenous production in Ukraine will not meet their demand, and so therefore they're relying on outside help that is coming, but it's having to ramp up. Whereas drones, they appear to be able to make or procure much more quickly. In fact, the claim is now that they are outstripping. So supply is outstripping not so much demand, but the ability to buy the stuff. So the Allies and Ukraine themselves are making they're making enough drones. Just can Ukraine afford to buy them all and get the logistics of getting them into position? This is a new type of artillery, high precision aerial artillery. It will gradually replace conventional cannon and rocket artillery since it's much more accurate and cheaper, and the recording of the target hits is visible to the operators of those drones. But we should immediately take measures to prevent the enemy from dominating the air due to the dominance of this reconnaissance of his reconnaissance drones and killer drones. Of course, losing things like Azu Park 1 and other radar systems in the last 24 hours will not help that matter. I don't know if it can pick up drones, but they are talking about the desperate need for countermeasures for drones. Right. Belarusian army officer was liquidating Krinky, according to mass media. He stormed Krinky in Kherson region as part of the 328th Regiment of the newly created 104th Airborne Assault Division of Russia. What's going on there? Is that a case of is this a mercenary? Now, we've seen mercenaries all over the Russian armed forces, or is this a case of utilizing Belarusian soldiers within the Russian armed forces? So there are some questions that need to be answered there. Now, I did a video on the marketplace strike, what seems to be mortar strike in Donetsk, that almost certainly was a Russian false flag attack, although someone did point out that it was snowy in that area mainly, and when they were looking at the splash marks of what looked like a mortar strike on the tram lines, that was not snowy. So actually, is that the correct explosion point for what happened in the Donetsk marketplace, or was that at a different time? But even with that, so if you drop that tram line explosion, actually, or when you look at the marketplace explosions, they were almost certainly mortar strikes, right? When you look at, and it's interesting, one of the threads yesterday was like, this is the size of a 155mm shell round, and this is what it does. You're like, that is not what happened at the Donetsk marketplace. So they weren't the Russians are claiming 155 and 152mm shells were involved, because they have to claim that because of the distance from the marketplace. And you look at the explosions, and you got knocked over, tangerine boxes and this and that, and you're like, where are these big craters? Oh, there aren't these big craters because it was done by mortar. And if it's done by mortar, then it ain't going to be the Ukrainians doing it. Anyway, just to add to this, and the idea that one of those videos seemed to show people either pretending to be injured, and then when the video was almost off them, then moving, or pretending to be killed and then moving, or people that were just horribly unconcerned. So they were filming this, and people are walking past on their mobile phones, or what's going on there? So these are truly people that are dying. No one appears to care. Or are you just filming actors? Anyway, this advert has been found. So casting for actor, pay is 1,300 rubles, no experience needed. A trip to the DNR or LNR, so that's the Donetsk People's Republic or Luhansk People's Republic. Everything will be filmed there. We need a big crowd of people to film short reports, scare quotes reports. Yep, these are your average people of Donbass oppressed, genocided by the Kiev regime. You'd see on RT. What's going on? Why are they recruiting actors to go to a war zone? It's all so dodgy, isn't it? And then, this is what freedom looks like in Russia. Mr. Putin has effed all sane people to death, said some bloke. This bloke here. Mr. Putin has effed all sane people to death. What's he get for that? For those words, a criminal case for state treason was opened against perm photographer and musician Grigory Skortsov. I can say that now. Do you know what? Rishi Sunak has effed all sane people to death in the UK. Oh, no one cares because we've got freedom of speech in the UK. Turns out we've got a damn sight more liberty here than you got in Russia. What was it? Oh, yeah, Russia's a dictatorship. That was it. I almost forgot. Oh, this is what freedom looks like in Russia. So because homosexuality is now seen as an extremist position, like ISIS, you know, if you're gay or bisexual, oh, you're as bad as a beheading terrorist. Now, if you are any kind of platform giving content that references homosexuality, that isn't like attacking it, then you are, in showing that content, you are promoting extremism. Russia has issued $566,000 in fines in 2023 to TV providers for showing LGBT content. In other words, freedom. Nothing says liberty like locking people up for saying Putin has effed all sane people to death and fining TV shows for having anything with homosexuality on. That's freedom, chaps. Ladies and gents, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care. Speak soon.